Shalom, shalom, everybody. This is Prophets of Awakening again. We're on another Sabbath class. This is 11th of July, 2020, and we're gonna do the usual. We're gonna start out with a moment of silence, and this moment of silence is for all the work that we see the Most High doing in the earth and in the spiritual realm, pertaining to our deliverance and our exit from these lands of our enemies. Back to the continent of Africa and the Middle East. Okay, so we're gonna do a prayer, moment of silence and a prayer. Oh Lord, we come this Sabbath day seeking thy face and standing before thee because you, O Lord, have given this day as a memorial. This is a day of rest and reflection. Oh Lord, we thank thee for your wisdom and that you have given us this holy day. We stand before you this hour with confusion of face and dismay. We stand before you this hour in the land of our oppressors. O Lord, thou knowest that they have changed your words in which you've spoken in times past unto our fathers and to the prophets drastically. You prophesied unto Isaiah long ago about our condition. And you, O Lord, have performed thy words concerning our confusion. Bring forth our understanding that we may stand before thee in spirit and the truth of thy great word. Peace be unto you. Okay, so with that being said, we're going to do a little current events, and then we're going to, anybody got anything they want to bring up for its current events that they want to share with us? Okay, what I got is I'm gonna play this video, and I'm gonna play it in two different parts. We'll play half of it and discuss it, and then we'll play the other half and discuss it. It's pertaining to they found recently, since this coronavirus broke out in this George Floyd incident and all that, they starting to find black men all over the place being lynched. And they trying to subvert the conversation by saying that these people they commit suicide, but that's not the case. So I'm gonna play. It's like it's 18 minutes. I'm gonna play half and half.
Quarantine report. I'm Amy Goodman. Amidst mass protests against racism and police brutality across the country, at least 5 men, 4 Black and 1 Latinx, have been found hanging in public across the United States in recent weeks. All 5 deaths were initially deemed suicides, but community advocates, scholars, and those all too familiar with America's racist history say there's another possibility: lynching. In Palmdale, California, authorities are investigating the death of 24-year-old Robert Fuller, a Black man who was found dead, hanged from a tree near the community's city hall earlier this month. City officials said he died by suicide, suggesting the cause was due to mental anguish related to the coronavirus pandemic. But Fuller's loved ones believe he was lynched, and the community has been holding protests calling for justice. A week after Fuller was found hanged, Los Angeles County Sheriff's deputies shot and killed his brother, Terron Boone, in what authorities described as a shootout in a desert town near Palmdale. Robert Fuller's death came 10 days after another Black man, 38-year-old Malcolm Harsh, was found hanged from a tree about 50 miles away in Victorville, California, May 31st. After calling for further investigation, Malcolm Harsh's family said over the weekend that his death was in fact a suicide and that they had reviewed video footage the police provided. Community activists are still asking why it took so long for a thorough investigation into his death. In New York, the New York Police Department's investigating the death of Dominique Alexander, a 27-year-old Black man who was found hanged in a Manhattan park 2 weeks ago. The local medical examiner's office ruled the cause of his death suicide. And in Texas, Congressmember Sheila Jackson Lee of Houston is calling for an investigation after 2 recent hangings. Last week, police found a 17-year-old black boy hanging from a tree in an elementary school playground in Spring, Texas. Earlier that week, a Latinx man was found hanged in Houston. This all comes as a noose was found in the garage stall of Bubba Wallace, the only African-American driver in NASCAR's Elite Cup Series. Wallace recently led a successful campaign to get NASCAR to ban displays of Confederate flags from its events. Well, for more on this topic, we're going to Durham, North Carolina, to speak with Jacqueline Olive, director of a film called Always in Season. It's a devastating documentary that examines the history of lynchings in the United States through the story of Lennon Lacey, an African-American teenager who was found hanged from a swing set in 2014. His mother, Claudia Lacey, believes he was lynched. Always in Season premiered at the Sundance Film Festival in 2019. Well, we're going to go to Jacqueline in a minute. But first, this is the film's trailer, a warning to our audience. This clip contains violent and racist imagery.
He met the male subject hanging from a swing, a black subject.
I think they hung him up to make it look like a suicide. It looked like a back in the day lynching. His body will be hung in the courthouse square for all to see. All white folks are invited to the party.
Lynching was a message crime. They happened in places where the body would be seen, and it's the public nature of lynching that really condemns the white community, because the idea that people didn't know, they did know.
As I started researching Black males committing suicide in public over the last few years, I became quite concerned that there may be a bigger surreptitious movement at play here.
The caption, last night picked before the game.
That does not sound like a person that was planning on killing himself.
That was the trailer for Always in Season. Jacqueline Olive, we welcome you back to Democracy Now! Under horrible circumstances of one death after another, young African-American men hanging from trees in the United States, not 100 or 200 years ago, but in these last weeks. Can you talk about the significance of this? Now, again, family members are not saying absolutely they know what happened in each case, as was the case in the particular hanging you looked at in Always in Season. But they are demanding answers and serious investigations. Can you start off with the Palmdale hanging in California?
Absolutely. So these hangings really come out of a climate in the White House in which there is intense vitriol and hatred that's being messaged, and people are being energized and activated around those messages. You have militia groups that are activated in increasing numbers. You have increasing numbers of news incidents, including the one that was found in Oakland, California last week. Incidents in which people are being threatened, Black people are being threatened with nooses. And so as this climate escalates, and you have these hanging deaths that are incredibly alarming, then the first question that Black folks often have is whether or not there was lynching involved. And so it is really important that when local officials come out to investigate these cases, that they frame their investigation and they frame their look at the evidence in this history. With historic lynchings, but also around the racial violence and division that's going on currently.
So you have Robert Fuller, who was found hanged outside of City Hall in Palmdale. And then you have Malcolm Harsh, like 60 miles away, found hung near the public library in Victorville. Now, the police departments in both these cases immediately closed the investigations and said that it was suicide. It took enormous pressure from activists in Victorville and the family to finally actually see video that the police had that showed, in fact, Malcolm Harsh, it did look like he had taken his own life. That isn't the case for Robert Fuller at this point. We don't know what's happened. And then you have these latest hangings of Black and brown people. Wednesday, police found 17-year-old African-American teen hanging from a tree, elementary school playground in Spring, Texas. On Monday, a Latinx man found hanged in Houston. And then one here in New York City. So talk further about how people can know what police assume and what the history is.
Sure. Well, typical of this case, and was certainly the case with Lynn and Lacey, that I researched really thoroughly as we filmed, is that the police generally show up, and they show up within 3 days or so, and they've made their conclusion of suicide. What they don't take into account is this history or the family's concerns deeply enough that there might have been a lynching and that their family member may have met violence. And so it was the case with Lynn and Lacey, is that the police his body was found on August 29th, 20 days after the uprising in Ferguson, Missouri, following the murder of Mike Brown. August 29th, 2014, on a Friday, and the police station was closed over the weekend because there was a holiday, and so they didn't come to investigate anything until Tuesday when they approached Claudia, Lynette's mother. And they didn't look through his phone, and they didn't look for evidence of anything beyond a suicide, but were really insistent that that was the case. And I found that this is happening again and again. And so families are really calling for there to be a deeper investigation and for justice. And you had mentioned that the family members of Malcolm Harsh have conceded that he committed suicide. One of the interesting things as I was reading, 2 points that they made, one of which is that the police didn't really investigate his case, even though it was a suicide. It ended up being a suicide. It's important that they show up and that they investigate it thoroughly, and they didn't do that until there was press attention. The other comment that was made around the case is that it's a relief that that wasn't a lynching. I think it's equally as important that if in these cases of suicide that we look closely at that. And so in my research, as I was researching for Always in Season, I found that there were dozens of cases of Black people found hanging publicly since 2000, since 1995. Actually, I started looking at the case of Antoine Sedgwick, who was found hanging in Hampton, Virginia, hours after the O.J. Simpson verdict. And that case was ruled a suicide. And so there have been dozens of deaths, and there unfortunately, sadly, are not exact numbers. There's a CDC report that I've been looking at that says that there have been 79 unsolved hangings of Blacks, and that they've all been males. In this report, 79 hangings that are unsolved between 2000 and 2016. And so you have all of these cases in the midst of violence we know that's not being acknowledged. If it weren't for the outcry, the public outcry around Ahmaud Arbery's murder, for example, then the McDaniels, Travis and Gregory McDaniel, and the accomplice would not have been held accountable. And so there is a justified outcry, even when the result is a suicide. There's a justified outcry that comes out of the Black community, but by anyone who's paying attention and concerned that these might be lynchings.
I wanted to ask.
Okay, so comments. Okay, any comments?
Yeah, I find it kind of ironic that, all of a sudden out of nowhere, it's like a bandwagon going on.
Right.
And, they trying to push the narrative.
Right, exactly. Anybody else?
I agree. My question while I was listening was, what is it that what kind of response do they want from us? Like, I mean, it just seems like a false flag, and like, what do they want us to do? It just seems almost unreal.
Okay. Yeah, well, like I was saying before with the other on Five Smooth Stones is that we're in the midst of Deuteronomy 28, and it's got to play itself out. Anybody else?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I did I hear her clearly when she said they've even found that some suicide by lynching or go back to 1995? Did she say that?
Yeah, she said that. Well, she said it more recently is 2002 until 2016.
Oh, okay.
But it goes out. But it goes back to 95 is when the uptick started back.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not taking it as they necessarily want a response from us. It's just that they want everybody to be consciously aware that we're in a season right now where it's time to recognize truth.
Right.
It's the season we're in, and things like for truth to start falling, and especially for Israel to wake up. So I don't think it's necessarily that they're looking for a response from us. Yes, we are awake. Yes, thank you for the information. I appreciate it because we have suspected that death lynching is what's been going on all the while.
Right. Exactly. Right. So, you got some, AJ?
Well, I was just going to add that pretty much what everybody else said. It just reminds me of Deuteronomy 28 that is still in effect, and it's not, the captivity is not over. It's just pretty much what all the lynching reminds me of. Because like you said, from 2002 to 2016, like I've been hearing about them the whole time I've been growing up. It's just that they're not publicized, that's not what they show on the news.
Right. And so Trump just gave them, the Trump administration, when he came on the scene, he just gave them the boldness to come back out again and do what they're doing now. And so it's two things about that. The first thing that happened when I was looking at this, the first thing that came to my mind was at the end of our captivity in Babylon, at the end of our captivity in Egypt, when the Lord of Hosts showed up and people can see that he was, that it was him. And then he had Moses as his mouthpiece. We see that the powers that be had an uptick. And what they did was, he said, make brick without straw. They was already being oppressed by making brick, but now when it's time for us, our captivity to be turned, and the Lord of Hosts showed up with all the signs and wonders, he said, make brick without straw. So we at the end of this captivity. And we see that now that we're at the end of the captivity, we see an uptick in the lynchings. And at the beginning of when I started this little video, the lady said that the purpose of a lynching is to strike fear in all the people around about. And so that's how they controlled us up until this point, was by those lynchings. And if you had any intentions to speak out or to make any kind of comment about just your situation, once you saw that lynching, you backed up. So, but that ain't working now. But they trying to use it again. That's why the lynchings are back. And so with that being said, I was gonna put out a little information. She mentioned it's a documentary that the lady got. Her name Jacqueline Olive, Olive, and the documentary is Always in Season. In case you want to go watch that whole thing. So anybody else got any more comments? Okay, I'm gonna let the rest of it play.
About the case of TT Gully, a Black transgender woman experiencing homelessness who was found hanging in Portland, Oregon. It got a lot of attention recently, and in fact, it got so much attention that a lot of people, including us, thought it had just happened in May of this year, but it was actually a year ago. The local medical examiner ruled her death to be a suicide, but her family believes she may have been killed. Now it's getting renewed attention as a result of the hangings in California, Texas, and New York have gained national attention. So as you point out, it is not only Black men in these cases. And talk about the significance of the renewed interest in finding out what happened, investigating T.T. Gully's death.
Yeah, I think it's important to look at. I also thought that the death happened on May 27th of this year, but in fact, it was May 27th, 2019. And part of that reason is because the story was dropped by the press in 2019 and then picked up with these more recent hanging deaths. And so this kind of invisibility that goes with these hanging cases in general is even greater with trans women, trans people like T.T. Gully, for whom the family still believes that she didn't commit suicide. And the last news reports I saw on the case were from 2019 until very recently. And so that's just an example of how when we look at these cases individually, we're not giving the issues the attention that's merited, the issue about collectively what's going on beyond just dropping in on one case and then out when the police decide that they've figured out or that they've investigated enough. It's important for journalists in particular to look at all of it comprehensively and in the context of historic lynching terrorism. And so just as with historic lynchings, certainly Black men were the primary victims of lynching, but women and children were also the victims of lynching.
And can you talk about how these hangings are often after some kind of horrific event, like the police killing of Michael Brown in 2014, Lennon Lacey, the case you looked at, Always in Season, that happened right after that. And then, of course, you have the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis, the police uprising, and then these subsequent hangings.
And they also come after touchstones that are racialized. And so there was a upsurge in noose incidents, threats by noose, when President Obama campaigned for the very first time. Between 2005 and 2008, there was an upsurge that was recorded by the Southern Poverty Law Center. And so there are these points in which there is some momentum by the Black community, a bit of progress that's met with backlash. And there's also these points in which there's this signaling from leadership that violence is okay. And so you have out of this, all of this violence that we see, and particularly Black people and brown people are really tuned into in ways that the mainstream doesn't necessarily acknowledge. We see it, we understand that there are connections between what happens when police shoot Oscar Brown in the back, when they murder George Floyd on video. And these hangings, and that there could possibly be a connection. And so the outcry, even when there's a suicide, is out of this sense of urgency that all of these things, including the news incidents and all of these ways that Black lives are threatened and minimized, they could very easily result in lynching.
You also have the case in 2018 of the son of a prominent Ferguson activist, Melissa McKinney's. Her son found hanging behind the family home in Ferguson. He was 24 years old. She says he was lynched. So in all of these cases, what are you demanding happens now, Jacqueline?
I think that they deserve a full investigation, and that and given the context of this history, and given what people in communities understand about the racial divisions in these communities, and the families concerned, that we look at them more than 3 days, that they are, and then that they are looked at as a whole, because whether or not these are lynchings or whether or not they're suicides, the questions around, is there this new trend for Black people to hang themselves publicly? There's been historically the stigma for Black people about hanging, and certainly hanging publicly and hanging from trees. But if these are suicides, then that's information that's really important to understand. In addition to understanding what are the issues around structural racism that can increase depression and increase anxiety and the suicide rate for Black people, those are all really important to understand. So you have, for example, Malcolm Harsh, who was found hanging, and even though the investigation hasn't concluded yet because of toxicology reports, you have him found hanging at a homeless encampment. And so there are issues about housing instability and insecurity for Black people in particular that are important to look at.
Jacqueline Oliver, I want to thank you for being with us. And again, thank you for your remarkable film, Always in Season, documentary about the history.
Okay, so any more comments on that? Anybody got any comments? No comments? Okay, yeah, so like I was saying before, what we see happening is that, we at the end of our captivity. And just like in the previous captivity in Egypt, when it was time for us to be delivered, when the Most High started turning our captivity, the powers that be didn't want us to go, and so they increased the fear, and they increased the pressure, and thinking that they was gonna, cause us to stay there, or cause us to be there more, but they didn't understand our power, strong one that was over us, and when they increased the pressure, he increased the pressure, and the next thing we know, we looked up and we was leaving our captivity on our way back to our homeland. So with that being said, I want to go into I want to read out the book of Joshua. Anybody know where we stopped at?
Yeah, 75.
What is?
I have, is that Jasher? No. Yeah, 75 you read.
So 76?
Yeah, that's the last one I see. Yeah.
Okay, I'm in book of Joshua, chapter 76. And Moses, son of Amram, was still king in the land of Cush in those days, and he prospered in his kingdom, and he conducted the government of the children of Cush in justice, in righteousness, and in integrity. And all the children of Cush loved Moses all the days that he reigned over them, and all the inhabitants of the land of Cush were greatly afraid of him. And in the 40th year of his reign of Moses over Cush, Moses was sitting on the royal throne, while Adoniah, the queen, was before him, and all the nobles were sitting around him. And Adoniah, queen, said before the king and the princes, "What is this thing which you, the children of Cush, have done for this long time? Surely you know that for 40 years that this man has reigned over Cush, he has not approached me, nor has he served the gods of the children of Cush. Now therefore hear, O ye children of Cush, and let this man no more reign over you, as he is not of our flesh. Behold," or I'm butchering his name, "Many-Crus, my son, is grown up. Let him reign over you, for it is better for you to serve the son of his Lord than to serve a stranger, slave of the king of Egypt." And all the people and the nobles of the children of Cush heard the words which Adoniah, queen had spoken in their ears, and all the people were preparing until the evening, and in the morning they rose up early and made Menicurus, son of Calculus, king over them, and all the children of Cush were afraid to stretch forth their hands against Moses, for the Lord was with Moses, and the children of Cush remembered the oath which they swore unto Moses. Therefore they did no harm to him. So I want to shine light on something because, like I said, I was talking a couple of weeks ago about how that people don't understand how these you got these Ethiopian Jews that they proclaim to be descendants from the Hebrews, Israelites, and you also have these people which we looked at on the conversation with uncomfortable conversation with the Hebrew non-Messianic Hebrew Israelite, that those Edomites was in the land in 70 AD, and that they fled from there. They fled from Israel when Titus and Vespasian ran them out and gave them safe passage to Spain and to those European countries. So those Jews, which are Edomites, they proselytized those people. They proselytized Japhet, which was Khazars in particular. And that's today we find out that 95% of the so-called Jewry today is from these Khazars, converts. Well, these Cush is Ethiopians. That's another name for Ethiopia. So at this time right here, they was Cushites. They from the excuse me. They're from the lineage of Ham. The Cushites at this period right here when I'm reading the Jasher. Later on, when the Syrian kingdom rose up and they came and took the 10 tribes and took them to Assyria and put them into captivity, he went and got other nations and put them in the different. Israel is divided up into 12 lots. So what you had was 10 lots that was open. The land was already, the vineyards, the crop was already set in place, the houses, everything was in place, but there was no people there. The king of Syria had took the 10 tribes out. Well, he went to go to fill the void. He went and got different nationalities of people from different areas, different countries, and brought them and put them in different lots, 10 different lots. Well, one of those lots was filled up with Ethiopians, Cushites. And excuse me. And so that land is called Samaria. That's how Samaria came into existence, was when they brought those foreigners and strangers into the land of Israel and filled those lots up. That's what Samaria is. And because of they heathens and they Gentiles, they had all these different religions and idols that they was dealing with. So they filled the land of where these 10 tribes used to be at with idolatry. And eventually, like the Most High said, the Lord of Hosts said, it rubbed off on the southern kingdom. And that's what caused the southern kingdom to end up defiling themselves. And then they had to go into captivity into Babylon. But I wanted to shine light on that for you to understand that these same people that they saying they went and like rescued, I think 15,000 of them back in the late 90s from Ethiopia. They call them the Falasha Jews. But they not, the only connection they got to Israel is because of what King of Syria did. And then even when the King of Assyria had brought them there, the Lord of Hosts wasn't trying to deal with them the same way he did with Cain. When Cain came up to make his offering, he told Cain get, because Cain had nothing to do with him. His father was a serpent. So when these people came there, originally was placed there by the King of Assyria, the Lord of Hosts was sending wild beasts in numbers and was killing them. And because of the way it was happening, and these animals was acting abnormal, and they was more fierce than normal, they knew it was supernatural. So they went to the king of Assyria and told him, man, whatever El or whatever strong one in his land, he got a problem with us. They're killing us. So king of Assyria went to where he had the Israelites at and got some of the priests. And the priests came there and told them how to dwell in the land. And through that process is how they got proselytized, converted and found out how to do the culture of the Israelite culture. And so from that point on, they and they was there so long, they think they're Israelites. And they think but they're not Israelites. Because like I said, Cush was the son of Ham. The Ethiopians come out of descendants of Ham, which are from the 6-day man. A totally different origin than Adam's descendants. The man that was formed, the Most High formed with his hands, and he got a personal relationship with him and all his descendants. And so to connect the dots with that, he later on, of the 7 from Adam, he took Enoch up. And he took Enoch up, had him to check out everything that was in heaven, see how everything go on, all the actual factuals, and he said, write it all down in a book and bring it back to the earth. And that book was a blueprint for every Israelite that was going to ever be born to view it, to get an understanding of how everything work in heaven. So you'll be able to conduct yourself on the earth before the Most High and before his kingdom. Okay, so I'm gonna pick back up in Joshua chapter 76, verse 10. And all the children of Cush were afraid to stretch forth their hands against Moses, for the Lord was with Moses, and the children of Cush remembered the oath which they swore unto Moses. Therefore they did no harm in him. So I want to shine a light on that because that's big, and it's a supernatural event, but we reading over it. So how you shine a light on that is, I was telling you, the Egyptians was beating the hell out of the Israelites for centuries, at least 2 centuries, and then all of a sudden when the time for the captivity to be turned, the Most High put a spirit on all the Egyptians to start giving them favor, and they started giving them gold and silver and all that. So the Most High is doing this. He's causing them to afflict them, and then as well to turn around, he's causing them to have compassion on them. And that's what we're looking at right now with these Gentiles. All of a sudden, their hearts being turned. And you see it all over the place, everywhere you go. They all of a sudden they trying to accommodate you. So like I was saying before, if you're trying to figure out what is reparations and our deliverance is at near, that's a telltale sign right there. It ain't just 1 or 2 of them. We see this all the way across the board, all over the nation. So, like I said before, this ain't nothing new. He did it with the Egyptians. He did it with the Persians, the Medes and Persians. He put a spirit on them to have compassion on us and to deliver us. And we're looking at the same thing right now. What we just saw right here. They wasn't gonna kill Moses because the Most High put a spirit on them, and made them remember the covenants that they had with Moses, and they sent Moses on his way peacefully. But they could have easily been violent and killed him. But the Most High put a spirit on him to protect Moses. So you have to understand that that's one of his characteristics. And so if you're trying to identify him, or you got questions, or you're trying to figure out what's up, then you understand how he operates. Okay. And then 12 says, Joshua 76 and 12. So Moses went forth from the land of Cush and went home and ceased to reign over Cush. And Moses was 66 years old when he went out of the land of Cush, for the thing was from the Lord, and the period had arrived which he had appointed in the days of old to bring forth Israel from the affliction of the children of Ham. So it's the same thing now. The day didn't arrive. The appointed time has arrived. That's why we see all the events that we see happening. So Moses went to Midian, for he was afraid to return to Egypt on account of Pharaoh, and he went and sat at a well of the water in Midian. and the 7 daughters of Raul the Midianite went out to feed their father's flocks, and they came to the well and drew water to water their father's flocks. So the shepherds of Midian came and drove them away, and Moses rose up and helped them and watered the flock. So, like I was saying before, everybody, I know everybody experiencing this, they're saying they have questions and they trying to, figure out what's this and that. Well, here go a big old sign right here that everybody reading over. Moses had to be searching the Most High out and trying to figure out what is, it says that the thing was from the Lord that he leave Cush. He had reigned over him 40 years, so Moses got to be saying to himself, what's the next move? What's the Most High doing? So verse 14 says, and the 7 daughters of Raul, they're going to be signed right there. Why all of a sudden, out the blue, he just got 7 daughters just for GP? That's a sign. He says, and the 7 daughters of Raul, the Midianite, went out to feed their father's flocks, and they came to the well and drew water to water their father's flocks. So the shepherds of Midian came, drove them away, and Moses rose up and helped them and watered the flock. And they came home to their father Raul and told him what Moses did for them. And they said, an Egyptian man has delivered us from the hands of the shepherds. He drew up water for us and watered our flock. And Raul said to his daughters, and where is he? Wherefore have you left the man? And Raul sent for him and fetched him and brought him home, and he ate the bread with him. So all Moses know was he see these 7 women. That's a sign. So he jumped up, helped them, and did all he did for them. And then look what happened after that. 18. And they said, an Egyptian man delivered us from the hands of the shepherds. He drew the water for us and watered the flock. And Raul said to his daughters, where is he? It's Most High at work. Wherefore have you left him, the man? And Raul sent for him and fetched him and brought him home and ate the bread with him. And Moses related to Raul that he had fled from Egypt and that he reigned 40 years over Cush, and that they afterwards had taken the government from him and had sent him away in peace with honor and with presence. And when Raul had heard the words of Moses, Raul said within himself, I will put this man in the prison house, whereby I shall conciliate the children of Cush, for he has fled from them. And they took and put him into the prison house, and Moses was in prison 10 years. And while Moses was in the prison house, Zipporah, the daughter of Raul, took pity over him. That's the Most High again. Took pity over him. Most High put the Spirit on her, and supported him with bread and water all the time. And all the children of Israel were yet in the land of Egypt, serving the Egyptians in all manner of hard work. And the hand of Egypt continued in severity over the children of Israel in those days. At that time, the Lord smote Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he afflicted him with the plague of leprosy from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head, only to cruel treatment of the children of Israel was his plague at the time from the Lord upon the Pharaoh, king of Egypt. For the Lord had hearkened to the prayer of his people and the children of Israel, and the cry reached him on account of their hard work. This is an anger. Still, his anger did not turn from them, and the hand of Pharaoh was still stretched out against the children of Israel. And Pharaoh hardened his neck before the Lord, and he increased his yoke over the children of Israel and embittered their lives with all manner of hard work. So, like I said before, look at the lynchings. Same thing now. When we first got here in this captivity, we was being lynched, and the hell was being beat out of us, and then it lightened up. And then now that the Most High came back and he dropped a drama on them, now the lynches have started back. They rather than submitting, they got worse. So it ain't nothing new under the sun. But we see right here, our deliverance, our forefathers' deliverance was at hand. When the drama increased, our deliverance was at hand. Our captivity was getting ready to be turned. And he says, 28, and when the Lord had inflicted the plague upon Pharaoh, king of Egypt, he asked his wise men and sorcerers to cure him. And his wise men and sorcerers said unto him that if the blood of the little children were put into the wounds, he would be healed. And the Pharaoh hearkened to them and sent his ministers to Goshen to the children of Israel to take their little children. And the Pharaoh ministers went and took the infants of the children of Israel from the bosom of their mothers by force, and they brought them to Pharaoh daily, a child each day. And the physicians killed them and applied them to the plague. Thus did they all the days. And the number of the children which the Pharaoh slew were 365. But the Lord hearkened not to the physician of the king of Egypt. And the plague went on increasingly mightily. And the Pharaoh was 10 years afflicted with the plague. Still the heart of the Pharaoh was more hardened against the children of Israel. And at the end of 10 years, the Lord continued to afflict Pharaoh with the destructive plagues. And the Lord, smote him with a bad tumor and sickness at the stomach. And the plague turned to a severe boil. At that time, the two ministers of the Pharaoh came from the land of Goshen, where all the children of Israel were, and went to the house of the Pharaoh and said to him, we have seen the children of Israel slackening in their work and negligent in their labor. And when the Pharaoh heard the words of his ministers, his anger was kindled against the children of Israel exceedingly, for he was greatly grieved at his bodily pain. And he answered and he said, now that the children of Israel know that I am ill, they turn and scoff at us. Now therefore harness my chariot for me, and I will betake myself to Goshen, and will see the scoff of the children of Israel with which they are deriding me. So his servants harnessed a chariot for him, and they took and made him ride upon a horse, for he was not able to ride of himself. And he took with him 10 horsemen and 10 footmen, and went to the children of Israel to Goshen. And when they had come to the border of Egypt, the king's horse passed into a narrow place, elevated in the hollow part of the vineyard, fenced on both sides, and low, plain country being on the other side. And the horses ran rapidly in that place and pressed each other, and the other horses pressed the king's horse. And the king's horse fell into a low plain while the king was riding upon it. And when he fell, the chariot turned over the king's face, and the horse laid upon the king, and the king cried out, for his flesh was very sore. And the flesh of the king was torn from him, and his bones were broken, and he could not ride. For this thing was from the Lord to him. For the Lord had heard the cries of his people, the children of Israel, and their affliction. And his servants carried him upon their shoulders a little at a time, and they brought him back to Egypt. And the horsemen who were with him came also back to Egypt, and they placed him in the bed. And the king knew that his end was come to die, as I don't know his name. A Parthenon, the queen, his wife, came and cried before the king, and the king wept greatly, weeping with her. And all his nobles and servants came on that day and saw the king in that affliction, and wept a great weeping with him. And the princes of the king and all his counselors advised the king to cause one to reign in his stead in the land, whomever he should choose from his sons. And the king had 3 sons, 2 daughters, which are Parthenos. The king had his wife had born to him, besides the king's children of concubines, and these were their names. The firstborn, I'm butchering these names, Othara, the second, Atticum, and the third, Morim, and their sisters, the names of the elder, Batha, and the other, Acusa. And the author, the firstborn of the king, was an idiot, precipitate and hurried in his words. But Atticum was a cunning and wise man, and known in all the wisdom of Egypt, but unseemly aspect, thick in flesh and very short in stature. His height was 1 cubit. And when the king saw Atticum, his son, intelligent and wise in all things, the king resolved that he should be king in his day after his death. And he took for him a wife, Gideah, daughter of Abilah, and he was 10 years old, and she bore unto him 4 sons. And he afterwards went and took 3 wives and begot 8 sons and 3 daughters, and the disorder greatly prevailed over the king, and his flesh stank like the flesh of the carcass cast upon the field in the summertime during the heat of the sun. And when the king saw that his sickness had greatly strengthened itself over him, he ordered his son Atticus to be brought to him, and they made him king over the land in his place. And at the end of 3 years, the king died in shame, disgrace, disgust, and his servants carried him and buried him in the sepulchre of the kings of Egypt in Zoan, Mesarine. But they embalmed him not as was usual with kings, for his flesh was putrid, and they could not approach to embalm him on account of the stench. So they buried him in haste. For this evil was from the Lord to him, for the Lord had requited him evil for evil, which in his days he had done to Israel. And he died with terror and with shame, and his son Atticus reigned in his place. Okay. Anybody got any comments on what I read? That was Joshua chapter 76. Anybody got any comments?
Yeah, that reminded me of what happened to Antiochus Epiphanes.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. Because it's major. Like I said before, first of all, who knew that this king was afflicted with a leprosy at the time when Moses showed up? Or when they don't tell you about all this, that this king, this Pharaoh was afflicted with leprosy. When he made the order to make them make bricks without straw.
Right.
You don't know that. That's not in the Bible. We don't know that none of that. There's a reason for that. So you can see the hand of the Most High. And like I was saying before, we know it ain't Jesus. And that's got to be the reason why they're not putting it in there, because you can see that ain't none of Jesus. Right. But you just stuck him back there in the Old Testament, but that ain't him right there. So let's look at this right here. Anybody got any more comments?
Okay, so can we or should we expect that someone that whoever a ruler may be, or that ruler may be, that won't let the children of Israel go, shall be inflicted with some type of disease?
Well, this time it's like I was saying before, it's a think tank. It's a group of people, which is Esau. And when you understand who the Edomite is, he's small in number. So, like I was saying before, when you go to the book, when you go to the New Testament, and Jesus is a concoction of a group of people, Edomites, that was at the Council of Nicaea. So when you see the words that he's saying, everything he's saying is a group of people decided that, and they put it there. They blew him up first for you to listen to what he's saying, but it's not him saying it. It's this group of people saying it to take you in a certain direction. They're giving you a certain type of ideology, a certain type of mindset. So it's a think tank. So what you're gonna see happen in the last days is he's gonna punish a group of people, which is a nation of people, which is in Obadiah, at the end of Obadiah. Let me read that right quick. I was trying to find this, but let me read that.
I got that one for you. It's 2 Maccabees 9, starting at 5.
Yeah, I was in 2 Maccabees. I just couldn't find it. What chapter?
Chapter 9, 2 Maccabees 9 and 5.
Yeah, I got it right here. So it says, this is when Antiochus Epiphanes, after all he had done to the Jews, and we see what this Pharaoh had done to the Israelites in Egypt, and the same thing happened right here. So when you understand that from what happened in Egypt, then you won't understand you understand this. It says, but all-seeing Lord, the God of Israel, struck down with an incurable but unseen blow, for he had hardly uttered the words when he was seized with an incurable pain in his bowels and sharp internal pains. Same thing with the Pharaoh. Very justly, for he had tormented the bowels of others with many unusual miseries. He did not desist at all from his insolence, but was more and more filled with arrogance, breathing fire in his fury against Jews and the Israelites and giving orders to hasten the journey. But it happened that he fell off his chariot. Same thing as the Pharaoh happened, as he was rushing along and was racked in every part of his body from the fall. And the man who just now presumed to command the waves of the sea in his superhuman boastfulness and thought he could weigh the mountain heights in his scales was flat on the ground and had to be carried in a litter, making the power of God manifest to all men. See that? So the same is manifest to us today now by what we just read and reading this. Now we see who power this is. It's manifest in front of our face. It says, flat on the ground and had to be carried in a litter, making the power of God manifest to all men. They didn't flip that word God, making the power of the Lord manifest to all men, so that the worms formed from the impious creature body, and while he was still alive in anguish and pain, his flesh fell off, and because of the stench, look at this, the stench. They couldn't even bomb the Pharaoh and put him in his tomb because of the stench. Same right here. Because of the stench, the whole army turned from his corruption and disgust. The men who had shortly before thought he could touch the stars of heaven, no one could now bear to carry because his incurable stench, intolerable stench. So it was then that broken in spirit, remember that word because I'm going to go somewhere else. Broken in spirit, he began for the most part to give up his arrogance and under the scourge of God, scourge of the Lord, to obtain some knowledge, for he was tortured with pain in every instance. And when he could not even endure his own stench, he said this: it is right to submit to the Lord. And since man is mortal, not to think he is the Lord's equal. So, where was this prophesied here? Can somebody go to Daniel chapter 8, I think it is, and read verse 25.
Okay, I got Daniel 8 and 25. It says, and through his policies also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, and shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without hand.
Okay, so who is the prince of princes?
The Lord of hosts.
The Lord of hosts. To tell you right there in Daniel that Michael is the great prince. So he a prince. Yahweh ain't no prince. And so he the prince of princes. So we see who it is that did that. So if he did that, we see how the Most High took the melanin out of Mary. That's how we was able to go back line upon line, precept upon precept, to see what he done to Cain. It just that Miriam had Moses there, and her flesh was returned, but Cain's flesh was never returned. So now we see that the Lord is the Lord of hosts. He's the Prince of Prince. It ain't Yahweh, and so he did the same thing he done at Epiphanes. We find that he done it earlier to the Pharaoh. So if that wasn't Yahweh that done that to Antioch Epiphanes, it wasn't Yahweh that done it to the Pharaoh. So that lines that put everything in make it more plain. The pieces of the puzzle come together better. We see it ain't Yahweh, and the damn sure ain't Jesus. So we see now who it is. It's the Prince of Prince, the Lord of Lords, Lord of Hosts. It's right there in our face. Okay. So, with that being said, anybody else got any comments on what we just read in Joshua chapter 76? No comments? Okay, so what I'm doing right here is we probably gonna be here probably about another 10 or 15 minutes. But what I'm gonna do is set up for the tonight class, and that's we was dealing with. We had watched the video from last night about the Essenes, and I'm going into some more in-depth information, but I'm just going to do a precursor to it today, and I'm hoping that everybody else can go and Google and do some research on it too. We'll talk about it more tonight because it has to be understood about these Essenes. So the topic for the lesson for today, and we're going to finish it tonight, is who are the Essenes and what are they? What's their connection to Jesus Christ? So it says the Essenes were a Jewish mystical sect, somewhat resembling the Pharisees. They lived lives of ritual purity and separation. They originated about 100 BC and disappeared from history after the destruction of the Jerusalem temple in 70 AD. See that? They say that in 70 AD, it's lining right up. We know from what we just studied, we see that there was Edomites that was in the land. And that's what Malachi tells you, is Edomites there. The Israelites was gone. We saw the route that the Israelites took. They went into Africa, and the route that the Jews took, which is these scenes are part of them, they went into Egypt. I mean, they went into Europe, Spain, and into all the different parts of Europe. And that's the same place where Paul went on all his journeys. He went amongst these Edomites, prophesying to them, giving them the new God he concocted. Okay, and so it says these Essenes were a Jewish mystical sect, somewhat resembling the Pharisees. They lived lives of ritual purity and separation. They originated about 100 BC. So 70 years later, the temple got destroyed. 70 years later, Jesus showed up. Then 70 more years, the temple was destroyed, Herod temple. It says, and disappeared from history after the destruction of the Jerusalem temple. The Essenes are not directly mentioned in scripture. There's a reason why they ain't mentioned. Although some believe they are to be referred to in Matthew 19, 11 and 12, and Colossians 2, 8 and 18, and verse 23, interest in the Essenes were renewed with the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls, which were likely recorded and stored by the Essenes. Recorded. So if it was recorded, then you changing it. You hoodwinking it. If you recording it, you hoodwinking it. So then it said it has been popular among some scholars to claim that John the Baptist was an Essene. There are some similarities between John and the Essenes. John was in the desert. Luke 1 and 80. The Essenes were in the desert. But John and the Essenes used Isaiah 43 to describe themselves as a voice in the wilderness. The baptism or washing practiced by John and the Essenes required a change of heart. So like I was saying before, this washing and this baptism came from Egypt, because that's where these priests, these men came from. They set up in the desert, but they came from Egypt, from the 29th dynasty, priest of Amun, priest of Ra. And so it says, and the Pharaoh was the one that went down to, they worshiped the water. They worshiped the Nile River. So he went down there and washed himself in the water. That's where these baptisms come from. And then they want to connect it to the Old Testament and say that baptism, which is to be submerged in water, submerged in the water at the Nile River. And so in order to put it in the Old Testament, they say that Israel was baptized when they went through the Red Sea. But the Most High made a point to let you know they went through dry shod. Didn't get a drop of water on them. So how in the hell you gonna get baptized and ain't no water on them? So that's a big example of typology. So anyway, it says and said at the same time, there was a significant difference between John the Baptist and the Essenes. The Essenes hid themselves away from society in the wilderness. John was a very public figure. John had a much stricter diet than the Essenes. John preached Jesus as the Messiah. The Essenes did not recognize Jesus as the Messiah, but they thought that a teacher of righteousness would himself be an Essene. There was a strong organization among the Essenes that were missing among John the Baptist's disciples. So was John the Baptist in the scene? While it is possible, it cannot be implicitly proven either biblically or historically. The scenes are a set of Jewish or sect of Judaism do not exist today. However, there are fringe groups that call themselves the scenes. So where the disconnect that this how like I said before, you're dealing with a think tank, as a group of people, group of Edomites said that dictate your thought. If you don't have no mind, or you're not thinking like a Hebrew, they're gonna dictate your thought. So they're trying to disconnect Jesus from these scenes, but Jesus already knew they was when he came from the monastery in Egypt. That's why he went to Judea. He went straight to the damn Judean desert to the scenes where they was at, and they knowing that who he was, and knowing that what had happened, he was the rightful heir to the throne in Egypt, the rightful heir to the Roman Empire, because his father was the first Caesar. But he wasn't raised as a soldier. He was raised as a wise man by the monks. So that was their sign. So he went straight there, right to here, to this Qumran. And so, like I said before, you let it ferment and do your research and see what conclusion you come to. But like I said, he went right there, dead to Qumran. After when he left at 30 years old. And like I said before, they got these people. It wasn't the Essenes that was out there in the front selling those dead birds and stale pigeons and all that when he turned the tables over. That wasn't the Essenes. We see how the Essenes was entering the temple. They was backdooring the temple. And that was the Sadducees, the Pharisees that was out there in the front. It's three different sects. And these, like I said before, the anger came because of these Sadducees and Sadducees, which is what Brutus and all them was that killed his daddy earlier. That's what triggered his anger. So anyway, any comments? And I'm gonna close this out by going to go back to this video, back to this illustration right here. Like I said, see, that's Telerod. They go to Dead Sea Scroll. This is where the Qumran was at. Over here by Dead Sea. They go to temple right here. Jerusalem. It's showing you right here from the aerial view. And then you go to this Herod temple. And they go to the Scene Gate right there. He go where Jesus encountered the people, the Sadducees and Pharisees that are up here. This is the back door gate to get into the temple. This Herod temple. Ain't no Israelites there. Ain't Yahweh ain't there. The golden menorah ain't none of that there. And back to the conversation last night, they got a semblance of Hebrewism, Hebrew culture, but it ain't the real deal. It's just enough to fool or the people. But Zerubbabel temple destroyed. And so you say, what you talking about? Here goes Zerubbabel temple. Right here. See? This is the one they dug up. See here, it's not the same as Herod's temple. It's showing you all this here. The outer court, the altar, standing stones, all this stuff right here. This is temple. This here was gone. And got quickly destroyed this. This is what Herod built. Herod tied to these Essenes. This ain't nothing new today. These same people, these same Essenes got access to the Vatican. Right here. They coming from over here, right into the back door in here. Coming out the wilderness, coming in the hill. That's what they're talking about Paul, the street called Straight. Oh, that's a scene when you do your research and look at how they talk and their words and the language they use. A street called Straight fit right in there with these Essenes. like I said, they dealing with Christianity, and when you say the way, what they talk about in Christianity, that came from Buddhism. Buddhism was the way, and it's just like they changed up. They split Buddhism. We got two types of Buddhism now. You got two different Buddhas. One Buddha, the original Buddha, when the Greeks got there, was a black dude with a little nappy hair on his head. They got another sect of Buddhism now, Mahayana Buddhism. It's a white man. And we see the same thing they did with the Jews was black. The Israelites was black. And in the Old Testament, and the God in the Old Testament was black. The angels and all them was black. Then they came with Christianity and attached that book that they concocted to the Old Testament, but all the God in the New Testament white. Two different versions of our culture. And that's because of these people, these Japhet, Cain descendants showed up. And they synchronized everything. Yeah. So, like I said before, I talked about that right there because I'm gonna go a little more in depth with these Essenes and and tie in more information as far as John the Baptist and all these people that you're dealing with, Philo of Alexandria and all them Essenes, and they versed in the knowledge of Egypt, what they call that. You had to go 50 years in order to become a priest priest of a moon in Egypt. Can't think of the name of that. It's a word they use, but I remember it and I mentioned it tonight in the evening Shabbat class. So, with that being said, anybody got anything else before we go, or comments or questions? Everybody good?
It's a good lesson.
Okay, yeah. So I'm gonna bounce off of this tonight and go, like I said, go a little more in depth. And so I'm gonna see everybody at 6:00 for the evening Shabbat class. The close
The
out.
video that you referred to, that was the one you posted yesterday, right?
Yeah.
About the scenes.
Right.
Okay.
Are the evening classes recorded on for Saturday Sabbath class?
Yeah. All of them get recorded.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna be traveling, so I won't be able to. I don't think I'll be able to.
Okay. Okay. Shalom, everybody.
Shalom.
Shalom.